Wellington Dickens III is charged with killing 4 of his children over several months. The horror inside that home has left a community searching for answers and asking how this could ever happen.
Welcome to True Crime Lab Hub, where real crimes unfold and hidden motives are exposed.
Man, I murdered my children, a couple of my children, a couple months ago. They're in my garage, man.
The case surrounding Wellington Dickens is one of profound tragedies, marked by an alleged betrayal of trust that resulted in the deaths of 5 children. The narrative unfolds through the chilling confession of the father himself, revealing multiple layers of loss that spanned several years. The core details, pulled from affidavits and reports, paint a picture of sudden violence followed by the shocking revelation of a hidden, earlier death. The initial discovery, which occurred on October 27, 2024, involved 4 known victims, all children or dependents of Wellington Dickens. The 4 initial victims: Wellington Dickens, the eldest son and namesake; Zoe Dickens, a daughter; Leah Dickens, the youngest daughter; Sean Brasfield, Dickens' stepson. These 4 children, ranging from a primary school student to a young adult, had their lives cut short in a manner Dickens himself described as a result of over-disciplining, though the nature of their suffering was immediate and devastating. Their identities, confirmed by officials, represent a complete family loss. The circumstances leading to their deaths were directly confessed by Dickens himself on October 27, 2024, when he allegedly called authorities to turn himself in. The circumstances surrounding the deaths of the 4 children began with a voluntary phone call made by Wellington Dickens III to authorities on October 27. This call was not placed in a panic or a plea for help, but rather a confession and a statement of surrender. Dickens contacted a dispatcher, allegedly admitting to the killings. Crucially, he made an early distinction, stating he did not torture his children, but instead, he over-disciplined them.
Behind every headline lies a story of love, betrayal, and cold-blooded murder. Subscribe now and step inside the world of true crime.
This statement suggests a mindset where the deadly actions were framed internally as a form of extreme, misguided punishment rather than sadistic intent, though the outcome was fatal. Johnston County Sheriff's Office deputies responded to the address provided by Dickens. Upon their arrival, Dickens stated that his 3-year-old son was still alive inside the house, but that 4 of his other children were deceased inside the trunk of a vehicle located in the residence's garage. The deputies, upon verifying Dickens' claim, were confronted with the horrific reality. For children, hidden in the vehicle, having died at the hands of the person meant to protect them. The existence of a 5th child, the 3-year-old, who was alive and unharmed at the time, added a heartbreaking layer to the scene, underscoring the selective nature of the alleged violence. Dickens was immediately taken into custody and charged with 4 counts of murder. This initial, tragic chapter of the case was shocking enough, but the most deeply disturbing revelation was yet to come. During conversations with officials, Dickens made a second, far more unsettling confession: the existence and burial of a 5th victim, his son, Riley. Riley, a 1-month-old infant. Dickens claims Riley died shortly after he moved to a home in Zebulon, east of Raleigh, North Carolina. He told officials that the infant began to have poor health before dying. This suggests a claim of natural or non-violent death, potentially to mitigate responsibility, or perhaps a sudden, fatal decline that he chose to conceal. Dickens allegedly buried the infant's body in the nearby woods. Relatives stated that after Dickens moved to Zebulon, they never heard of or saw Riley again. The infant's death was never reported to authorities, and until Dickens's confession years later, it remained a complete secret outside of the alleged perpetrator. The confession regarding Riley has initiated a secondary, challenging investigation. Johnston County Sheriff's Office Chief Deputy Jeff Caldwell confirmed that the search for the child's remains is ongoing. The authorities noted that an improvement in the weather will be necessary to enable a smoother and more effective recovery process of the body. This search highlights the difficulty of locating remains buried years ago without specific markers. The charges against Dickens now reflect this full extent of loss, as he is formally charged with 4 counts of murder, with the investigation into Riley's death continuing. The Dickens case, while shocking in its scope, offers stark lessons on the crucial role of community awareness, support systems, and the reporting of suspicion in preventing severe child abuse and intimate partner violence. A father allegedly resorting to violence due to over-disciplining points to an extreme breakdown in stress management, potentially coupled with isolation. Viewers must understand that chronic, overwhelming parental stress, financial, emotional, or social, can be a precursor to abuse. If you see a parent who appears persistently isolated, overwhelmed, or is speaking about their children in overly negative or punitive terms, reach out. Simple, non-judgmental offers of help, babysitting, meal support, or just a listening ear can disrupt the isolation that often fuels severe abuse. The case of baby Riley is a massive failure of the system to track and account for a young life. Relatives noticed they never heard of or saw Riley again after the move, but the death went unreported. The public must be strongly encouraged to report any missing child or suspected unaccounted for life. The phrase, "It is better to be wrong and save a child's life than to be right and silence your fear," should be paramount. If a child suddenly disappears from a family unit or is never introduced, it must be reported to Child Protective Services or local law enforcement immediately. The privacy of the adult should never outweigh the safety of the child. Dickens' statement about over-disciplining serves as a crucial warning about the escalation of corporal punishment. While the vast majority of parents who use corporal punishment are not murderers, any form of physical discipline carries the risk of escalation under stress, transforming into abuse or, in this horrific case, fatality. Families must be educated on nonviolent, constructive discipline strategies. Resources for anger management and parenting classes should be aggressively promoted as community norms, not resources only for families in crisis. When a parent feels they are losing control, they must know how and where to seek immediate, confidential support before a breaking point is reached. In this case, a 3-year-old child was located alive in the house. This surviving victim will carry an immense, lifelong trauma. Communities and viewers should be reminded that true crime stories are not just about the deceased. They are also about the survivors. Support for trauma-focused care, long-term guardianship, and emotional rehabilitation for the surviving child must be prioritized and funded by social services and community aid. The Dickens case stands as a devastating account of concealed tragedy. It forces us to confront the fact that violence against children can be hidden in plain sight, not just for a moment, but for years, emphasizing the collective responsibility of society to serve as a safety net for its most vulnerable members. The sight inside the trunk was the nightmare no one wanted to imagine. For young lives tragically lost. This wasn't just a crime. It was the total ruin of a family. The victims were 10-year-old Wellington Dickens IV, known as Little Delano to some family members, 9-year-old Zoe Dickens, 6-year-old Leah Dickens, and 18-year-old Sean Brasfield, the stepson. They were a cluster of young people all in various stages of life, from primary school to a young adult just starting his journey, whose only shared circumstance was their dependence on the man who had allegedly taken their lives. For the community in Zebulon, the news struck like lightning. How could a father, who had been living quietly among them, be capable of such an act? Investigators immediately secured the scene. The affidavit obtained by NBC News detailed Dickens's bizarre and unsettling confession. When he spoke to the dispatcher, he framed his actions as an issue of discipline that had gone too far. He wanted to make it clear that he hadn't subjected his children to long, drawn-out suffering. The words, "I over-disciplined my children," suggest a claim that he simply lost control, using a sudden, violent act in the misguided name of punishment. The full medical examinations would later determine the true nature of their deaths. The scene itself was a study in contradictions. The house, the place where the children should have been safest, was now the center of a quadruple murder investigation. The garage, a typical mundane space, had become a chamber of horror. The most crucial, immediate detail for the deputies was the safety of the 3-year-old boy. The fact that this youngest child was left alive in the house after his siblings and step-sibling had been killed and hidden speaks to a frantic, likely stressful and possibly disorganized sequence of events. The immediate focus shifted to caring for the survivor and documenting the evidence surrounding the deceased. As the Johnston County Sheriff's Office began the painstaking process of removing the victims and gathering forensic evidence, they were also dealing with the confusing statements made by the suspect. When a killer calls the police, it's usually for one of two reasons: a final, conscience-driven breakdown, or a desperate, twisted attempt to control the narrative. Dickens's calm demeanor and his insistence on the over-disciplining angle strongly suggested the latter, an attempt to minimize the horror of his actions. While deputies searched the home, they were looking for anything that could explain the motive: a financial crisis, a family conflict, or any immediate event that could have triggered such extreme violence. At the time of this early investigation, the answers remained hidden beneath the surface of the accused cold composure. But this case was about to get much darker. Just when investigators thought they had grasped the full scope of the tragedy, the loss of 4 children, the alleged killer, Wellington Dickens III, decided to reveal one more secret. It was a secret he had kept hidden for years, a ghost of a child who had never been reported missing, never even officially recorded as dead. The investigation was no longer about a single day of rage. It was about a pattern of life and death that spanned years, reaching back to when the family first moved to the Zebulon home. The sheer weight of 4 recent deaths was now compounded by the cold, unsettling claim of a 5th hidden victim. The case was about to shift its focus from the garage to the dense, quiet woods surrounding the property. This new piece of information would make the tragedy of the Dickens family infinitely worse. When the police investigate a terrible crime, they expect to deal with the facts laid out before them. But in the case of Wellington Dickens III, every piece of information led to a deeper, more troubling secret. Just as the shock over the 4 victims, Leah, Zoe, Wellington IV, and Sean, began to settle, Dickens reportedly revealed something that stretched the tragedy back years. Wellington Dickens III admitted to officials that there was a 5th victim, his son, a 1-month-old baby named Riley. Imagine the change in the room when that name was spoken. The investigation was no longer just about the chaos of that recent Friday afternoon. It now involved a death that had been successfully hidden, perhaps for years, inside the family's history. It turned the alleged killer's actions from a sudden breakdown into a long-term pattern of concealment. According to the affidavit obtained by NBC News, Dickens told the authorities that little Riley was his son. He said the baby died shortly after he moved his family to the home in Zebulon, the same house where the 4 other children were recently found deceased. A 1-month-old baby is fragile, totally dependent on its parents for everything. The idea of an infant passing away is tragic enough, but Dickens's alleged actions that followed were beyond understanding. He claimed that Riley began to suffer from poor health before he died. This statement is critical. By claiming poor health, Dickens may have been trying to suggest that Riley died of natural causes, or at least causes that were not directly violent. However, his actions after the death spoke volumes about what he truly feared. Instead of calling for help, instead of contacting a doctor, instead of reporting the death to the proper authorities, which is the legal requirement for every death, especially that of an infant, Dickens allegedly decided to take matters into his own hands. He reportedly buried the tiny baby's body in the woods near the Zebulon property. Think about the cold, silent action that requires. To take the body of your newborn son, walk out into the quiet woods, dig a grave, and leave him there, unmarked and unknown, is an act that chills you to the core. It's an act that allows a father to wipe an entire human life from the record books. And for years, that is exactly what happened. The affidavit revealed that relatives of Dickens knew about the family's move to Zebulon, but after that move, they never saw or heard about Riley again. The infant simply vanished from the family's life and the public eye. They had a reason to be suspicious, but because the death was never reported, there were no records, no police investigation, and no public concern about the missing child. The simple act of burying the baby in the woods allowed Wellington Dickens III to keep a devastating secret for what may have been a very long time. This hidden tragedy adds a terrible weight to the crime. It suggests that the family had been carrying the shadow of this concealed death for years, long before the tragic events of October 27th. As soon as Dickens confessed to this fifth hidden death, the Johnston County Sheriff's Office had a new, agonizing task. They had to find the remains of baby Riley. This is a search made incredibly difficult by time, nature, and the lack of precise information. The search was immediately focused on the wooded areas surrounding the house, the very land that had concealed the secret for so long. Johnston County Sheriff's Office Chief Deputy Jeff Caldwell confirmed to reporters that the search for the infant's remains is ongoing. He noted that it's not a simple task. Authorities have pointed out that improving weather conditions would be necessary to enable a smoother and more effective recovery process. Searching dense, wet, or frozen woodland for the remains of a 1-month-old infant buried years ago is one of the most difficult and heartbreaking tasks law enforcement can face. Chief Deputy Caldwell emphasized that the investigation remains a live and developing case. This investigation remains ongoing with additional details being released when available and appropriate to release, he stated. The confession about Riley completely changes the nature of the charges against Wellington Dickens III. While he was initially charged with 4 counts of murder for the immediate victims, the information about Riley means he is now facing the full depth of his alleged crimes. He is not just a father who snapped. He is allegedly a father who concealed a death for years before committing the murders of his other children and stepson. This revelation forces us to look beyond the immediate crime scene and ask, what kind of life had this family been living for all those years, knowing, or perhaps not knowing, that the remains of an infant lay hidden just outside their back door? What kind of isolation and despair must have been present in that home for such a secret to remain safe? The truth is that every secret has a cost, and in this case, the cost was the life of little Riley and the shattered lives of everyone who loved the 4 children who were later found. We have now heard about the 2 parts of this horrifying case: the immediate crime against the 4 children and the years-long concealment of baby Riley's death. When you hear about a parent burying a child in the woods instead of reporting the death, what do you think that tells us about their state of mind? Do you believe his claim that Riley only died due to poor health? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.